So we're going to talk about tools for docs maintainers because we believe that everybody in this room kind of has a shared dream, which is that we all want a calm and focused way to make our project's knowledge as good as our project's software. So anyway, hi, I'm Erin McKean. I'm a developer relations engineer working on contributor experience at Google, and part of my job is helping open source projects have better docs. And if you need other credentials, I'm also an honorary fellow of the late lamented Society for Technical Communication. Let's pour one out for them. And I run the nonprofit online dictionary WordNick. And I also run the Semicolon Appreciation Society. I might have a few of those stickers. But probably more relevant to this talk is that I've been involved in Season of Docs since 2020. This Google Season of Docs program was created originally by the Googlers Sarah Maddox and Andrew Chen. The first couple of years, it was focused more on mentorship, much like Google Summer of Code. And then for the following years of the program, it was a grant-making program. So we gave money directly to open source projects to hire technical writers to write docs. Unfortunately, 2024 was the last year of the program, but we had more than 130 open source projects go through. Was anybody here a participant in Google? Yay, all right, thank you. And these projects wrote more than 200 case studies. And since we all learned so much from the projects that went through the program, we wanted to boil down those 200 case studies into some tools for all the projects that didn't get a chance to be in the program. So you can read the case studies at the website. Don't worry about writing down URLs. We'll have it down. The slides are up for you to download later. But helping us boil down those 200 case studies is Daniel Beck.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a technical writer and a programmer. That means I know lots of ways to use a semicolon. And I'm a dues-paying member of the Semicolon Appreciation Society. In my career as a freelance docs consultant, I help software development teams make docs and build tools and process that make docs. And most of my work is open source. For instance, I'm a longtime contributor of MDN Web Docs. If you've seen one of these banners about browser compatibility, this is in large part my fault. I've worked with a lot of different clients from really small startups, 5 people, all the way up to Google. And I've seen lots of ways to produce open source documentation. And I'm excited to share some things that I've learned, both firsthand and through the case studies. So that's me, and that's Erin. And so who are you people? You are probably someone who cares about open source docs. You are probably empowered to make decisions and changes in your open source docs. We think you're somebody who needs help, and that you're willing to accept help, probably from us. And if you are somebody who cares about documentation, then you have probably had the docs impulse. And this happens in moments where you feel the docs deficiency. You're reading outdated documentation, and you think, oh, this should be updated. You're writing a long explanation into a GitHub PR comment, and you think, this shouldn't be here. Or you're describing the same thing for the 3rd time this week in a meeting. You look something up in the docs, you can't find it. Or you're making an excuse. You say, this should be documented, but... And when you say to yourself, I need docs, it ends up wrapping around a lot of assumptions and beliefs and secret anxieties about what your software does, what your users expect, and what you and your collaborators are capable of doing. And I want to unwrap this a little bit. So if we peel back once, we find that we're really saying, I need to satisfy a user or project need through docs. That it's not just words, it's in service of something specific. And if I peel back again, there's even more there. It says, I need a process through which I or my collaborators satisfy a user or project need through docs. Docs don't happen by magic. The fact that you haven't done it already means that it's real work, and it needs time and attention. And if we peel back again, we find that it's, I need a process through which I or my collaborators satisfy a user or project need, of which docs is one possible path. Maybe the real thing that you need to do is to fix a bug instead of write a workaround for a bug. Or maybe people aren't feeling welcome to contribute to your project, and you need an event to change the culture. And so I've decomposed this phrase "I need docs" into 4 different things. So we have a user or project need, a motivation, a reason to do this thing, why, an outcome that satisfies the need. So a deliverable, and not necessarily written documentation, but it's something. What is that something? A process, so a task or sequence of tasks. How and when will this work be done? And people to do the work, skills, time, who has that stuff? And so I've taken this thing, I've said, okay, I need docs, and I've now made it much more complicated, right? But no, I have taken a vague statement of intent and turned it into 4 checkpoints for your software and the culture that produces it. And this is kind of a dangerous thing for me to say as a tech writer, but I don't really think of documentation as a thing. Documentation is actually kind of a process of understanding your software project that has high quality documentation as a side effect. That even if you don't get to the end of that process where there is a thing, you still get to learn important stuff about your software project. Now, I do want you to complete that process. I think I need docs is a good intuition, or at least a lot of the time. And by visiting these 4 things that we talked about, it means that we're not going to skip the learning process that will pay dividends beyond producing some text files. And we've got some tools to help you visit each of these 4 things.
So what if you had a handy guide to help you through those 4 things? If you had something that helped you pick a path that was right for your project, to learn about what your users really need, to figure out what you already have and what you still need to do, and to do the actual work of writing docs and maintaining them, wouldn't that be nice? Well, it turns out we do have this thing, the Docs Advisor. And I'm just a substitute Erin here. The Erin who wrote the Docs Advisor was Erin McKean. You probably know Erin McKean's work, and if you don't, today you're one of the lucky 10,000, right? She worked on the COVID tracking project. She did work on governance in the Fediverse based on in-depth research with people who run Mastodon and Hometown servers. She did a really difficult to read deep dive into difficult to read because it's terrible, not because it's hard to read, about what Facebook and Meta did and didn't do in Myanmar. And so, as a nice break from researching genocide, she dug into the 200 reports from the Season of Docs program, and plus did some original research with open source documentarians to produce, ta-da, the Docs Advisor, which you can find in our GitHub repo. We'll be linking it at the end of this talk. And the Docs Advisor has 4 parts. And in the first part, it's really about how to find your path. So do you have limited resources but no urgency? She'll walk you through a planless iteration, which has a tiny bit of planning. If you have limited resources and a tight timeline, you can do a mini overhaul. Pick one section, really get it up to a high quality. And if you have plentiful resources and a tight deadline, you could do a heroic overhaul. Like, go through all your docs, make everything better. If you have plentiful resources and infinite time, you can do whatever the heck you want, right? Like, you have no forcing function. And so the different approaches, she has a little cheat sheet in the Docs Advisor, which I'm sharing with you here. The planless iteration, the upsides of just picking something, picking a few things, doing continuous improvement has lower starting costs, fewer bottlenecks, lower risks, right? You're just trying some stuff. But it's less useful if you have to do substantial restructuring to your docs. A mini overhaul, it has a more rigorous coordination because you're going to pick something that's got prioritization baked in, but there's a moderate risk of falling out of sync with something else in the project. While you're overhauling over here, things might be changing significantly over there. And you might solve a problem in a single area in a way that doesn't generalize to the rest of your project. A heroic overhaul, that's great if you need a whole project revision. It's helpful if you have to majorly restructure your documents because you can see the whole picture. And it gets some pre-work and planning out of the way first, so you have something really useful even if you don't make it all the way to the end of the overhaul. But there's significant risk of falling out of sync or getting stuck. And then it's very vulnerable to loss of momentum because everyone likes to be a hero at the beginning. Nobody really likes to be the last hero standing. And fluctuating priorities. If you find a significant vulnerability in your project, everything's going to drop while you fix that, and the heroic overhaul might fall to the side. So other parts of the Docs Advisors really focus on how do you find out who your users are and what your users need? Because I can guarantee you that the imaginary user in your head does not have the same needs as your actual user in your actual project. And a great way to start learning about your users is to figure out who uses your project's outputs, who are your contributors and potential contributors, and who are the project's maintainers. You know yourself. But if you're on a bigger project, you might not know everyone who's considered a maintainer or who is doing the work of a maintainer without the title. And then you really have to rev up your notes-taking engine. So think about, what do you know or suspect about these people and their documentation needs off the top of your head? Yeah, I know, we're talking about docs programs and projects, and we're saying, hey, you got to take a lot of notes. But you have to take a lot of notes. You can't keep everything in your head. Think about the range of expertise that you see or expect to see in your users. Do they actually have that expertise? If not, you probably need to help them get there. What kinds of conceptual difficulties do they tend to experience? And which of these things are within your project's remit or scope, and which are external? And so in Season of Docs, we actually saw some problems with scope, especially around conceptual difficulties, that were just out of scope for the project. Because some of the scientific projects that went through Season of Docs, they could not teach people enough physics to be able to use their project. People had to come to those projects with enough of the actual needed scientific knowledge. Teaching people physics or biochemistry or neuroscience was outside the scope of what their project could actually do. But some of the hardware projects could actually build the knowledge that their users needed. So be real careful about not trying to teach everyone everything. Some people are just going to have to revel in their ignorance until they can get to a point that they can use your project. And of course, you're still ignorant too, right? You can't know everything about your users just by introspection and looking at your project. You have to get your users to explicitly tell you things. Asking users to friction log is one of my favorite things to do. Give them swag if they'll do it. You get them to perform a specific task with your project and write down everything that gets in their way, every single point of friction, along with their reactions and their feelings. Like, how horrible was it to do this thing? You really need to know. And then you can gather up complaints from the places where people are already complaining, and you know where those places are, right? GitHub issues, emails, discussion channels. This can be tedious. It's not easy to read a lot of complaints about your project all at once, like physically or emotionally. But it will help fill the gaps about what you need to document. So you might think, oh, wow, this sounds like a summarization task. This is a great place to use an LLM. But try to resist that impulse, because you really want specifics, right? And LLMs tend to generalize, because they're really just nuclear-powered Markov chains, right? So try to get specific things from those complaints that you can actually act upon. And then every time you talk to someone who uses your projects, have a ready-made list of questions in your back pocket that you can ask them. Just say, hey, what do you think about this? And then heroically resist the urge to jump in and tell them where they're wrong. Just let them rant, tell them everything that they think, gather it as best you can, and just smile and nod. Because you want to hear from them, you don't want to tell them. That's what the docs are going to be for. And so the kind of understanding that will really improve your docs process is usually subjective and qualitative and not quantitative. And a lot of people jump right to, oh, we're going to do a survey. But unless you have someone in your project who is actually a trained survey designer, what you're going to get is very specific wrong questions that are going to get you very quantitative, specific wrong answers. So yeah, send a survey when you need to know what t-shirt sizes people want, but don't send a survey asking people what they want to see in your docs unless you have a very good survey designer. And if you have a very good survey designer, let us know, because ours is out on leave right now. So So once you've gone through the Docs Advisor, it really gives you time to assess and plan. Working through the Docs Advisor will get you to the point where you can prioritize those users' needs, because now you know them. You can establish your overall project goals. You can assess your writing and editing resources and choose a suitable documentation structure to work toward. So suitable documentation structure is kind of a pretty vague phrase. Like, what is a suitable documentation structure? Like, that's a home for your information to live, but what is that place and how do you get there? Well, Daniel has some good news for you about that.
So if you've worked through a process like the Docs Advisor, you will have learned some things about your audience, who they are, what they expect, what they want to do. And then we can begin to fill in this Venn diagram of user needs, of maintainer capability, and that can be pretty challenging. As a maintainer, you might be very oriented towards the software development work. That you have probably very good intuition about bugs and features and how to ship them. Or sorry, not how to ship bugs. Don't do that. But how to fix bugs, how to ship a bug fix, and how to ship a feature. And your intuitions about docs might be less mature. And so it can be kind of difficult to recognize unprompted what your capacity to do this work is, what the applicable skills that you have are to do this work, the things that maybe you could develop, and maybe the skills that might be counterproductive. The assets you already have, the things that you can that you can kind of take and kind of put into that home, to find that structure and to publish directly, or tools that you can pick up that will help solve this problem. And avenues of support. What are the things beyond kind of immediate you or your project? Who are the people in your network? What are the resources that already exist out in the world that can help you carry this work out? And so we've got another tool that can help you to recognize those things and link them to the actual outcomes that you're going to get. And that is the documentation project archetypes. And so this is something that I wrote. It's kind of a cookbook of ways to approach specific variations of docs work. And so it's going to help you match up what you are, what you have, what you need with a desired outcome. And so the archetypes frame documentation work in terms of what happens if we start with a docs problem to solve. What does the project to solve that problem look like? What resources would you need to bring to bear on this project? Who would your collaborators be? How would you know when you're ready to start? And what is going to be the evidence that you've actually completed the work? And so I'm going to talk you through an example here. So the migration is one of about a dozen archetypes. And we break it down into the same pattern for each one, and we start with the names. So when you hear the phrase replatforming, retooling, reformatting, upgrading, you are probably hearing about a migration project. And then there is a brief description of this project to help you know what it is, even if you don't read the rest of this. You can at least sound like you know what you're talking about in a meeting. And so in this case, a migration project is probably going to help either make your docs faster or to deliver your docs to your users faster or better or in higher quality, something like that. Then we break down the audience. So this project, who stands to benefit from it? And so some projects are very outwardly focused. So it's about your users. It's about helping them achieve some task or gain some knowledge. Or it might be inwardly focused. It's about helping your contributors do something. So in the case of the migration, it might help you, improve the workflow for your documentation work. And so in this case, it's probably more, inwardly focused, depending on the particulars. Next, we break down when to do this thing. What problems is this kind of project going to solve? And so this is going to help you choose whether this is actually the right fit for what you want to achieve. Next, we break it down into tasks and deliverables. So how will you know when you're done? Well, you'll probably have done some activities. You will have probably produced some artifacts of the work. And this is also where we highlight things that are maybe out of scope. Things that when you see those creeping into your project plan, you should think about planning and executing them separately. So when you're migrating to a new CMS, maybe don't also rewrite all the docs at the same time. And so this is your cue to perhaps break that out into its own thing. Next, talk about key people. And really this is about time. This is about who is going to use up that that fraction of their life towards this effort. And there's actually a lot more participants than just like the sort of primary person. So there might be some tooling expert that's going to mostly do the work of implementation, but you also need code reviewers, or you need docs reviewers to see what the new outputs look like. And if you're bringing someone in from outside your project to do some of this like specialist work, we try to give you clues about what a good fit for that work would look like. Lastly, we talk about delay and failure risks. Bad things happen. We don't want them to happen, but they do sometimes. Some of those things are avoidable through planning, so we try to flag things that you can work into your project plan to avoid those problems. But we also recognize that some things are just emergent, and that just having the warning that those things might happen can at least help avoid panic. So there's about a dozen of these projects. And I want to emphasize that point because I don't want you to fixate too early on one particular outcome. There's a risk of becoming overcommitted, and good outcomes do not happen by force. They happen by lining up your goals, your resources, your capabilities with the actions that you're going to take. And Erin is going to talk a bit about how to avoid bad outcomes.
It would be nice if we could always avoid bad outcomes, but that doesn't always happen. And when you're choosing the docs archetype, the type of project that you want to work on, one of the biggest dangers is the Abilene paradox. Are you going to Abilene? And so the Abilene paradox is a situation where a group of people collectively decides on a course of action that nobody really wants. So like somebody says, hey, it'd be a great idea to go to Abilene. I've always wanted to see Dwight Eisenhower's house. No one's ever said that. And then everybody's like, am I the only person who doesn't want to go to Abilene? They make it sound like it's a good idea, but I'm not really feeling it. And then everybody winds up going to Abilene and having a terrible time. So when you are suggesting a project, make sure that there's enthusiastic buy-in from everyone. And the way that you can tell is when people volunteer to do specific things. They don't just say, oh yeah, call me when it gets started, right? They don't just say, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let me know what I can do to help. If they say, yeah, I want to do the first task on the list and you better not give that to anybody else, then you're not going to Abilene. And there's a related thing that I just learned about pluralistic ignorance, which is where we think that nobody else in the group wants what we want or thinks what we think. And the only way to avoid pluralistic ignorance is to have a moment of disclosure where you say, is it just me or does Dwight Eisenhower's house sound like kind of a boring trip? And then everybody's like, oh, I thought I was the only one who thought that. So don't go to Abilene. Don't be pluralistically ignorant. Say what you mean and say what you feel. Otherwise, everybody's going to have a bad time. And the other way that you can at least try to head off some bad outcomes is to remember that you can always quit. Like, you can always quit. Even if you've all decided on a project, you don't have to see it through to the end if everyone's like, we're not feeling this anymore. And some ways that you can get around the never-ending project is to build in rest stops. Think about places during the project where if you got there and decided to go no further, it would be fine. Maybe you only get through the user research. Well, that's probably going to be useful to someone else who has more energy next quarter or next year or when new people come into the project. Try doing a pre-mortem. Look at the risks that are laid out in the archetypes and be like, okay, if that happened to us, what would we do, right? How could it go wrong? And then I really like having dead hand switches where you set milestones in the project where if everyone at that point does not agree to continue, you stop. And that way you don't have you don't have the least conscientious, the most conscientious person just keeps dragging that project along by themselves. Say, we need a minimum of how many people? 2 at least, to keep going. If we reach this milestone and everybody can't continue to participate, we're just going to stop so that it doesn't all just land on the last person standing. So we've talked a lot about resources and talking about the docs advisor, talking about the docs archetypes, but what we really mean is like resources in the human resources sense of the word, and then what we really mean by that is technical writers. Now, we actually haven't told you anything about how to find a technical writer because that could be a whole talk by itself. So sorry for the draw the rest of the owl vibes, but there are a lot of resources in the Open Docs repo. But once you have found your technical writer, once you have drawn the rest of the owl, Daniel will walk you through the most important part, which is how to onboard them.
So we have implied something here that is perhaps dubious, which is that a tech writer or other docs contributor can join your project and contribute. And this isn't a trivial thing, and so I'm going to talk about this difficulty and how to approach it. 80% of the trouble here is of onboarding is in tooling. What is true for developers is also true for writers. Writers are more technically adept than you might guess. We are often building tools, or at least duct taping tools together. But there is a universe of different tools, and even within a sort of familiar domain, there's different configurations and workflows. And so the hidden secret first task that every tech writer has when joining a new project is to revise your README or your project setup docs. It's actually probably a good idea to make it an explicit first task, but there you go. And so it's that thing that you have to do before you reach that first build and that first commit, and any of the actual docs work that follows. The other 20% of onboarding is learning who to ask, usually about tooling. For larger projects and ecosystems of projects, there's often a sort of formal organization. There's like the kind of like nominally like, all right, this person's in charge of that and knows about this other thing. And then there's the actual informal flow of information within your project. And docs contributors live by that informal network. And so the faster you can bring someone into that world, the sooner they're going to be able to produce high quality documentation. A good way to bootstrap this is with a binary tree. Have a brief introductory conversation with your new docs contributor. Talk about your expectations, your aspirations, the problems that you're working on, not just documentation problems, but in general, like what has your attention, and name your two closest collaborators. And then send your new docs contributor off to meet those two people and repeat this exercise with them until they have established a sort of map of the flow of information within your project. Now, all projects, big and small, need norms and expectation setting. So if I'm going to contribute documentation, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. When do I file an issue for that? When do I ask in chat? When do I DM someone versus send an email to the mailing list? If I'm going to ask you a lot of annoying questions, I would at least like to do it in a way that's legible and familiar to you. And so laying that out explicitly can be really, really helpful. And speaking of being annoying, the best way to get the right answer on the internet is not to ask a question, it's to post the wrong answer. When it comes to tech writing, getting it right the first time is a waste of time. Being perfect is not a strategy for producing high-quality documentation. Instead, this takes kind of two forms. The first is sort of wrong, rough drafts. So I'm going to write something that I know has errors, omissions, oversimplifications, and I'm going to share it. And it's going to bring people out to tell me how wrong I am. And this is a really cheap, effective way to confirm a mental model. It's a good practice. A very similar one is asking stupid questions. So is this complete falsehood correct? Like, no, it's not. And let me tell you how. That's like the dream scenario. And so when you see a tech writer asking seemingly dumb questions, that's not what's going on at all. We are just students of psychology. Now, there are whole talks on onboarding writers. A very good one is Nicola Yap's Write the Docs talk, Level Up, Onboarding that Enables Writers to Thrive. There is also an accompanied written toolkit, there's going to be links to this as well, for onboarding writers. And so now that you've got your team together, Erin is going to talk about how successful you're going to be.
So do you actually need a success metric? So I think that the best success metric is that you started with one set of problems, and if you're successful, you're going to have newer and more interesting problems. If you still have the same problems when you're done, maybe you aren't done. So that's my favorite success metric. Do you now have a better kind of problem? Then you are successful. So I think that the only rule of metrics is that you should pick something to measure that if it changes, your behavior will change. If a metric does not change your behavior, it is a decoration. It is not a metric. Sometimes they're called vanity metrics. Like, If your number of GitHub stars goes way up, is that going to change your behavior other than how much you brag? No. It's not going to change anything you do in your project. If you get a lot more issues, would that change your behavior? If you got a lot fewer pull requests, would that change your behavior? Only you know what will motivate you to change, to do something different, do something more, do something less. Pick that as your metric. Don't just pick an SEO-based metric or a feel-good metric to have something to measure. So anyway, at this point, you might feel a bit overwhelmed. But don't worry, we have written all of this down for you.
It's documented. So yeah, we've unloaded a lot of information here. Most of the resources that we have mentioned are in the OpenDocs GitHub repository. Please check this out. And if you notice things that need improvement, PRs are welcome. I'm sure Erin will be happy to review. Something you can do, like you don't need to actually become an expert in any of this stuff. You can start getting people together, and you can exercise this muscle by doing a doc sprint. So maybe in person, maybe virtually, maybe at a conference like this, it's a great opportunity to start running through the process of like shown in the Docs Advisor, or picking a project that applies from information you already have from the documentation project archetypes, and doing those things, even in miniature. So you could update your README file or refresh a wiki page, and that's going to be a great way to build this pattern of improving your documentation. And Sarah Maddox, a former Google tech writer, wrote a really great article about this. It's how to run an open source doc sprint, and I highly recommend reading that to learn how to do this. If you want to meet more people like Erin and I, you should check out the Write the Docs community. So it is a community for documentarians, people who care about documentation, no matter your job title. You can join a local meetup. There's a global chat where I'm a moderator. I'm happy to welcome you. You can attend a conference. There's one coming up in Berlin in October.
And the annual one in beautiful Portland, Oregon, where I live.
And you can check that out at writethedocs.org. A lot of the images in our talk came from the Rijksmuseum. There's just an absolute treasure trove of public domain art and photography. A few other slides were like Creative Commons licensed, so you have full links and photo credits by downloading the slides from Sked. And if you see us after the talk, we are happy to talk to you about the docs, and we might even have some stickers for you.
We absolutely have some stickers for you.
So go forth and document.
And I think we have time for a few questions. We have a couple more minutes. Anybody got a question? I'll do the mic running for a minute. All right, I'm just going to go hand out stickers if y'all don't have questions.
Thank you all.